OK, so interesting question. Can you ever like your mental illness? Alistair?
Well, first of all, because I can see Rebecca right there, I think we should give her a massive round of applause for that film. I think it... I mean, I have depression. I don't like my mental illness, but I had a psychotic breakdown in the 80s, and I do like that because I now look back on it as the best thing that ever happened to me, because I sorted myself out, I worked out what I really wanted to do, and I don't think I've done anything that I've done since, I don't think I could have done unless I'd gone through that experience and worked out why it happened, or tried to work out why it happened, and then tried to rebuild myself. So I actually look back at that almost fondly now, whereas my depression I don't love in any way at all, but I've learned how to manage it in part because of that. And funny enough, watching Rebecca's story there, the last book I wrote was a novel about a teenage alcoholic who self-harmed, and I don't have any experience of self-harm, but I went and talked to people who did. And what was extraordinary was to see people, including one girl who's called Hannah, who had literally hundreds of these marks on her arms, and who said that when she was doing that, the pain that she felt was less than the pain she felt inside, and when she did it, she thought maybe that pain would come out. And just getting your head around that, you can't love that. And what I thought was so moving about Rebecca's film is that if you're 12 years old, you don't choose how you are, you can only choose who you are. And I just think that this is why we've got to break down all this nonsense that, which I'm afraid people, even senior in politics, think that sort of depression, anxiety, and all these things are somehow choices that people make, as opposed to illnesses that people have.
A lot of hands went up immediately. Yes, lady at the back here.
What I really want to say is that you can love your mental illness. I've had mental health for 7 years now, and I personally think I get up every day, and yeah, it's hard, but I'm going to walk with pride, and I'm going to walk like I don't care, because you have to do that. You've got to be brave some days, even though it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, lady here.
I've had mental health illness for over 8 years now, and it's destroyed my life. I don't know what the future holds for me. I've had a best friend who's ended her life. So for me, I don't love it. I'm not ashamed of it, but as a person, no. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So.
Yeah, gentleman behind you there.
I think it really depends on where you are at your life. That it depends your perspective of if you look back on it. I look back on it now, and it really built my character. I have a lot to go on now, and I went through a lot of stuff, and as everyone probably here has. And I can look back and think I'm the person who I am now, and I've gone through so much, and I'm a much better person.
So like Alistair was saying, there's something that's constructive element to
so
it.
I can say now that I'm happy that it happened, looking back on it, but at the time, it's the worst thing that can happen.
Sure. Zoe, what's your experience of it?
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously only draw from what happened to me. I developed anorexia quite late on in life, age 22. And some days it was my worst enemy, and other days my anorexia became my best friend, and it was the only thing that I had, because I became very isolated, and I was being, it wasn't their fault, but I was being excluded by friendship groups, I wasn't working, so I clung on to my mental illness, and we had this weird relationship where some days it had control of me, other days, I had control of it, and it lasted for 4 or 5 years, and I still struggle with it now, but I think the balance is better. So yeah, I had this really strange relationship where I couldn't, did I love it, did I hate it? It's a strange one.
Yeah. Lady here?
I don't like my mental illness, considering it takes up a lot of my life and it affects everything I do. However, a part of me is still a bit scared to let go of it, because I'm scared that if I don't have it, I won't be protective of my family, because my illness involves me being very protective and making sure no one gets hurt. But then again, I would like to be rid of it, because I don't want it to ruin my future.
Sure. Yeah, gentleman at the back here with the glasses.
I think I agree with what Zoe said, that I have an eating disorder as well, and the feeling of control that you can get from having an eating disorder and other mental illnesses as well. You might hate the mental illness and some things it does to you, but it's just very easy to forget that when everything takes over, and love your mental illness more than anything else.
Yeah, lady here. They can't make their mind up. One of them has.
For many years, I suffered with like low mood, depression, anxiety, and it kind of came out in a really negative way towards people. So a lot of the time, it was kind of put down to, oh, she's just in a bad mood, but it was, I would say, I spent about 90% of the time being really low. And I went through a spout about 2 years ago where I was kind of like in a really deep depression and really suicidal. And I did manage to kind of come out of it, but I think having gone through that, it's changed me immensely as a person. And I'm happy I went through it. You know, although at the time it was probably one of the worst things that's ever happened to me, I think someone said something
So
about...
similar to what the guy up here said, looking
kind of
back.
built my character, and it's almost given me the motivation to kind of want to go on and like help other people that have been in similar positions or are going through similar things.
Yeah, lady down here in the front.
Yeah, just like that girl. The one thing I love about my mental illness is that I can help other people through it. Like I can actually build upon it and show other people that you can get through it, and it is all right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think, you know, what you two have just said is so amazing, because I'm now working with Beat, which is you probably know about this, an anorexia charity, trying to beat anorexia and bulimia and other eating disorders. And I think now what I do is pass on my experiences to other people that are going through that. And, you know, there's a couple of girls at my gym now who are, you know, who are painfully thin, and the gym aren't doing anything about it. So I feel like it's my role. I have to be able to try and help people, because I went through it and there was no one there to help me at the time. So I definitely agree with you two, and I've drawn on that, and now I can hopefully in the future help other people get through it.
Okay, what are people saying online,
Yeah,
Tina?
let's have a look at what Twitter's saying. This is the power bar. Should pop up. There we go. We've been asking people at home, can you ever like your mental illness? Interestingly, 58% of people who are engaging with us say no. Let's get to some of those responses. This one's come in that says, free speech, no. It's called mental illness for a reason. It should be treated, not liked. That girl Fox, I don't think you can like a mental illness. You can, however, develop an appreciation for how it changes you. And this one's come in from Alice. I hate my illness. Every counsellor I had thought I was faking it. I went through hell and still do. Sarah, what's your response? Do GPs have adequate training across the board?
I mean, speaking for myself, I would say that, you know, when you're in a place where you feel everyone's better off without you, of course you don't like your mental illness. But again, speaking for myself, I know I was a better doctor after I had an episode of depression than I was before it. And now, hearing what everyone's saying here, the message has to be about recovery. People recover, and it can make you a better person. It can make you much better at recognising it in other people.
A lot of people have a negative experience when they approach their GP initially.
Yes, and I think the point is that some GPs are better than others. What I'd like to see is all GPs have better training. But within a practice, if your doctor isn't sympathetic, see another doctor, because there's usually someone within every practice who is approachable. Ask around, and so if you're not happy, see somebody else. And of course, you can ask to have a referral. You don't need to accept that it's automatically going on tablets or anything. You can be assertive and say what you'd like to have, and push for that.
Okay. John, have you ever sought any medical sort of help at all?
Well, I've certainly self-diagnosed myself with 12 mental disorders from the Manual of Mental Disorders. I've got anxiety, which I often think, like a lot of mental illnesses and mental disorders, can lead you to do interesting things. You know, there's no evidence that we've been placed on this planet to be particularly normal, and sometimes it's our anxieties and our compulsions that can lead us to do rather interesting things. And can I just say, I've got a story that will put it up over the 50%, the yes, which is my friend Eleanor, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it got so bad she tried to drill a hole in her head with a Black & Decker drill to get the voices out. And then eventually she learned to live with her voices, and then she went back to college and did a degree. And when she was doing her exam, she got a first because her voices were telling her the answers.
Lady at the front here.
I've suffered from a very, very early age. I've been diagnosed with numerous labels, and it's always great to have a collection of things. Letters after my name in a slightly different manner than going to uni. But the one that comes to mind is BPD, borderline personality disorder. It's basically taking the emotions from one extremity to another. I can wake up one day and I'm on top of the world. I can wake up one day and not want to get out of bed and it be clearly suicidal. And this question really sparked something, because I don't think an illness is something you can love, but it's something you can work alongside and appreciate. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's your drive and the people around that keep you going. And as much as I was very lucky, I grew up in foster care, I had the most fantastic social worker, but it was still very difficult for me to get to see a counsellor. It took 3 years and 11 and a half doctors. There was a student. So it's really difficult, and I was so lucky, but I could have come out the other end, and I might not be here today if I hadn't have just got up and got the balls and gone, no, I'm not having this anymore. This is a part of me. It's not all of me.
Can I just say as well that last year, I mean, Sarah is what I would score as a very, very, very nice person for a Tory MP, OK? But
interesting qualification.
Right. However, last year...
You're very nice for a Labour.
Thank you. Last year, GPs in England referred over 800,000 people for talking therapies, and only 440,000 got it. That's fewer than half. So I don't think it's the case that you can just go and see a GP, and if it doesn't work out, you go to the next, because I don't think the capacity is there.
Yeah. So what can be done about that, Sarah?
Well, undoubtedly, we need to have better access to talking therapies, and we've doubled the access to talking therapies since 2010, but we need to do much more. We need to make sure that actually most people have the same access as you'd have for a physical illness. Why should it be?
Mental health services are being cut more than physical health services.
But actually, we're now seeing another 80,000 has gone in to actually improving access to psychological therapies, and making sure that just as you'd expect to have a waiting time if you had a physical problem, say like arthritis, why shouldn't you expect the same waiting times to be there for mental illness? So I'm very glad that's been brought in.
You can't wait, Sarah, you can't wait 6 weeks. You can't go into your GP and say, I'm having suicidal thoughts, or I'm about, my kidneys are shutting down because I'm not eating, and then for you to turn around to them and say, well, can you wait 6 weeks? Because these people don't have 6 weeks.
Indeed.
No, it has to be done immediately. I absolutely agree with you.
And we know that if you have early intervention for psychosis, and if you're seen within a fortnight for psychosis, we should be treating it as an emergency.
It is an emergency.
I think it's an absolute disgrace, for example. One particular bugbear of mine is that young people, sometimes as young as 12 in my area, are actually spending the night in a police cell when they're detained under Section 136. Now, can you imagine it? You break your leg, there's no place on the ward for your broken leg, so you get seen in the police cell. It's unthinkable. Yeah. Why shouldn't it be just as unthinkable for mental illness?
But that is a capacity issue. Yeah. That is a capacity issue. And I just think that you've got to face up to the fact, and the government has got to face up to the fact, mental health used to be seen as the Cinderella service. I think, to be fair, the Labour government did make a change on that. I think it's become the Cinderella service again, and within that, CAMS, Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, they become the Cinderella within the Cinderella. And in this hospital, just talking to the chief executive earlier, he said he is facing massive cuts over the next five years to keep this hospital going. And I think we've just got to face up. If we are going to get parity between physical and mental health treatment, we have to give that meaning through the expenditure that we put into it, and understand mental health is grossly underfunded in Britain.
Yeah. Certainly is.
Lady here.
I think training with GPs is a massive issue. While I was at uni, I obviously saw various different doctors there, and then when I went back to Bristol, saw different doctors, and everyone I went in, I'd had my diagnosis, I'd been given a certain milligram of antidepressant, and all they'd do is just write me a prescription and give me another one. There was never an option to talk about it, to check what I was on, whether I wanted to change what I was doing or anything. It was literally just as easy as handing out pills. And I think there should be more training, more talking, more understanding, I think, when you go in, that you feel comfortable to talk about it as well.
Because Sarah, it's interesting what you were saying about being a better GP after you were depressed, so
Yeah.
becoming more empathetic, I presume. So,
Yeah.
so assuming that everyone's not going to be depressed and then become a GP, how do you get around that?
I think that definitely within GP training, there needs to be much more emphasis on mental health. So not all those doctors who go on to become GPs have had time training in mental health. A lot of doctors, of course, will have an interest. And let's face it, doctors are like everybody else. There are some people who are much more empathetic than others anyway. And so we need to have better training and continuing professional development for GPs. But the point you raise is really important. What we can't have is people parked long-term on antidepressants.
Yeah.
We need to have a proper review, and it needs to be with somebody who understands.
Yeah.
More
People saying stuff
comments.
online still, Tina?
They are. This person's answering the question. Abby says, "Don't understand how anyone could love their mental illness." And a question for John: when does human nature tip into mental illness, and by whose standards do we classify it or them?
Well, this is a huge question. There's currently, well, in the last DSM, which is the Manual of Mental Disorders, there's 374 mental disorders over 886 pages. And yet, of course, it's tipping into normal behaviour. It's getting closer and closer and closer to the boundaries of normal. I'll give you an example. In America, kids as young as 4 years old are getting diagnosed with bipolar disorder because they're having temper tantrums and they're put on antipsychotic medication, and you know, kids have died. A little girl called Rebecca Riley died, 4 years old, and put on antipsychotic medication. I'll tell you the other thing. You're talking about, you know, just kind of giving medication after medication. If this country goes too far down that road, what will happen is what's happening in the United States at the moment, where I'm currently living, that if a kid is doing badly at school, the parents, and this is routine, the parents are brought in to see the headmaster, and the headmaster says, get them on Prozac, you know, get them on Ritalin.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Shocking.